Robert Kiyosaki, the author of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, says that earning money is a science that is not taught in schools. Schools teach us how to become an employee and build a career. If you are coming from a middle-class family like I do, then there's a high probability that your parents taught you how to become poor. And this is not because your parents don't love you or don't want you to be successful. It's simply because they themselves are not educated on this topic. They consumed expired information, and when you were born, they passed it on to you. Kiyosaki says, poverty is like genetics. It passes on from one generation to another. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is one of those finance books that I wish I had read when I was 14 or 15 years old. I strongly recommend reading the book or watching this video because I will be doing a detailed summary of all 7 key lessons. Lesson number 1, the rich don't work for money. When he was 9 years old, Robert and his childhood friend Mike weren't invited to a classmate's beach house because they were poor kids. Robert came home and asked his dad how to become rich, and the only response he got was, "You have to learn how to make more money." Even as a kid, Robert understood that this advice wasn't going to help him to become rich. Robert's father, whom Robert calls his poor dad, was a teacher and made a good living, but always struggled financially. Seeing how determined Robert and his friend Mike were to learn about making more money, Robert's dad, the poor dad, advised them to go and talk to Mike's dad, whom Robert called his rich dad. Both Robert and Mike were quite surprised because Rich Dad wasn't rich yet. Plus, he never finished 8th grade, but ran multiple successful businesses. Nevertheless, they went to meet Mike's dad. On the day of the meeting, he asked them if they were ready to learn how to make money. They were excited and nodded their heads quickly. He then made them an offer. He said that he would teach them how to make money, but not in a classroom style. He would only teach them if they worked for him. According to him, he would be wasting his time if they just wanted to sit and listen as they did in school. They could learn faster if they worked for him. Robert wanted to ask a question, but he didn't give them a chance. He said if they couldn't make up their mind decisively, then they would never learn to make money. Opportunities come and go, and being able to know when to make quick decisions is an important skill. They knew they had to make a decision. Robert and Mike looked at each other and both agreed to take the offer. Mike's dad was pleased and said he would pay them 10 cents an hour, and they would work 3 hours every Saturday. Even though Robert had a softball game that day, he chose to work and learn instead of playing. He knew this was his opportunity, and he didn't want to waste it. So, Robert and Mike started working for Mrs. Martin, who was an employee of Mike's dad, and used to take care of a small supermarket. They were the kind of stores where people bought essentials like milk, bread, butter, and cigarettes. The only problem was that the stores didn't have air conditioning, so they had to keep the doors wide open to the road and parking lot, which meant that dust would swirl and settle inside every time a car drove by. Their job was to take canned goods off the shelves, brush them with a feather duster to get the dust off, and then restack them neatly. It was mind-numbingly boring work. They worked for 3 hours every Saturday and got paid 30 cents, which was not very exciting for them, since one comic book cost 10 cents back then. They did it because they wanted to learn how to make money. But after 3 weeks of doing this, Robert was ready to quit. He felt like a slave, working for just 10 cents an hour, and hadn't even seen Mike's dad since the first meeting. So, at lunchtime on the 4th week, he told Mike that he was quitting. The school was boring enough, and he didn't want to waste his Saturdays doing this job anymore. He was done. To his surprise, Mike started smiling and said that his dad had expected this to happen. He had told Mike to meet with him when Robert was ready to quit. It made Robert mad, but Mike said that his father's way of teaching was different from Robert's parents. He didn't like to lecture and used experience as a way of teaching. Robert agreed to meet with Mike's dad the following Saturday to hear him out. Even his real dad was angry with Mike's dad. Robert's poor dad had advised him to demand a raise of at least 25 cents an hour and to quit if he didn't get it. When Robert arrived at Mike's house, he was made to wait in line for 45 minutes before Mike's dad finally appeared. Frustrated and angry, Robert told Mike's dad that he had not kept his end of the bargain. He had promised to teach him if he worked for him, but he had not fulfilled his promise. Robert accused him of being greedy and not respecting his employees. He asked Robert if teaching meant talking or giving a lecture, and Robert replied with a nod. Rich Dad told him that life is the best teacher of all and that most of the time, life does not talk to you. He explained that life often pushes us around to teach us something. Some people let life push them around while others fight back against the wrong things, such as their job, boss, or spouse. But only a few people welcome life's push as an opportunity to learn and grow. Rich Dad said that he had over 150 employees, but none of them had ever asked him to teach them about money. They only sought jobs and paychecks, never really grasping the purpose of their work. However, when Mike told him that both of them wanted to learn how to make money, Rich Dad decided to create a program that mirrored real-life experiences. He paid them a mere 10 cents an hour, which initially made them angry. But he explained that he wanted them to experience life's push so that they could understand what he was trying to teach. When Rich Dad asked Robert what he had learned from working for such a low wage, he complained about his greed and lack of respect for his workers. He even threatened to quit if his rich dad didn't pay him more or teach him more. Rich Dad explained that most people would do exactly what he was suggesting: quit and look for a higher paying job. However, this usually wouldn't solve their problems. He wanted Robert to understand that waiting for a raise, thinking that more money would solve his problems, was not the solution. The solution is to make money work for you. Robert was slowly starting to understand the lesson Rich Dad was trying to teach. Rich Dad asked if Robert still had a passion to learn. When Robert said yes, he told him he was going to stop paying him for the work at the store. Robert was confused. He came for a raise, but now he was going to work for free? Rich Dad said that if he wanted to make more money, then he needed to use his head and figure it out. Robert and Mike worked for free for 3 weeks. One day, Mike's dad showed up and took the boys outside for ice cream. Rich Dad asked if they learned anything yet. They said no. The Rich Dad told them they better hurry and start thinking about the lesson that was staring at them. To explain the lesson, he asked the boys to look at Mrs. Martin and the people in the park and think if the life they were living seemed exciting to them. They worked hard for little money their whole lives, clinging to the illusion of job security and looking forward to a 3-week vacation each year and maybe a pension after 45 years of service. Rich Dad said if this kind of life excited them, he would be willing to offer them a raise of 25 cents an hour. Their heartbeats raised, and they knew it would mean so much to them, but still, they said no. Seeing their resistance, Rich Dad raised his offer to $1 an hour, then $2. Each time he raised